For years, the world has become accustomed to seeing Donna I saw Trump as the man who ignited debates, defied protocols, and turned politics into a spectacle. But no one expected that the same man who tightened sanctions and ignited speeches would now emerge with a peace proposal. And worse, or better, offering friendship to Iran. Ironic, isn't it? The same leader accused of provoking global tensions now presents himself as a peacemaker. It's as if the arsonist had decided to put out his own fire. With a handshake. This shift, however, isn't just about politics. It's about the invisible game behind peace. The ceasefire in Gaza was the first act of a strategy that blends diplomacy, economics, and narrative power. Trump realized that the world, tired of bombs, was ready for a new form of warfare. The war of influence. And in this field, he knew how to play like few others. The tycoon-turned-statesman once again used his negotiating skills. And this time, not selling skyscrapers, but a new vision for the Middle East. But is the world ready to believe it? Behind the rhetoric of peace lie vested interests, secret agreements, and repositionings that could redefine the global balance. It's easy to see the optimism, but difficult to ignore the calculation. The question hanging in the air is simple and dangerous. When Trump speaks of peace, is he healing the wounds of the East, or merely redrawing the boundaries of power? It was on a morning load. The world stopped in anticipation to hear Trump. Screens were divided between skepticism and curiosity when he firmly announced the ceasefire in Gaza, something few believed possible. The words "end of hostilities" echoed like a discordant note amid the noise of the last decades of conflict. It was like watching a gambler known for his bluffs lay his cards on the table, and this time there was no doubt that they were real. His serene expression almost provoked the question everyone feared to ask: what comes after peace? As news reports competed for headlines, the public seemed divided between astonishment and relief. Some called him a visionary, and others saw him as an opportunist, a man who transformed the world chessboard into a stage for his own narrative. But whether by strategy or conviction, the fact was that Trump was there, in front of everyone, proposing something no one expected, extending a hand where previously there had been clenched fists. Like a businessman reinvesting in a bankrupt company, he spoke of Gaza, Iran, and the need for a fresh start. Behind the scenes, diplomats exchanged silent glances. They knew every word was measured, every pause carried intention. The Arab world, accustomed to reading between the lines, understood. It wasn't just a ceasefire, it was a repositioning. Peace in that speech sounded less like a truce and more like a transaction. After all, when a man who built empires talks about reconstruction, what he's really offering is an opportunity. And perhaps there, the next great geopolitical movement was being born. For decades, the name Iran rang out in American discourse as synonymous with threat. Sanctions, accusations of terrorism, nuclear programs, and a rivalry fueled since the 1979 Islamic Revolution had transformed the two countries into historic enemies. It was as if every diplomatic gesture came with a coded message. And suddenly, seeing Trump, the same man who had previously tightened sanctions, offer friendship felt almost surreal. It seemed as if the tables had been turned, and the once villainous villain was now being invited to dance in the ballroom of global politics. But behind this gesture was calculation. Iran is not just a country. It is a key that opens or closes doors throughout the Middle East. It controls routes, influences militias, and holds energy reserves that make the world go round. When he extended his hand, Trump wasn't just talking about peace. He was talking about oil, trade routes, and containing China and Russia in the region. It's the age-old art of turning an adversary into a partner, and he knew that, in diplomacy, a well-calculated gesture is worth more than an army on the move. Still, this rapprochement seemed to defy common sense. How could one trust someone who, until yesterday, was the declared enemy? It was a fascinating paradox, and perhaps why it was so powerful. Iran, tired of isolation, saw the American proposal as a way to regain strength. Trump, for his part, saw Iran as a springboard to cement his image as a global peacemaker. And so, what began as a ceasefire in Gaza slowly took on the shape of a global reconfiguration. As the spotlight turned to the public speeches aside, the real developments took place away from the cameras. In discreet rooms in Doha, Moscow, and Riyadh, intermediaries exchanged documents, coded messages, and silent handshakes. Qatar, known for its ability to communicate with everyone and offend no one, became the thread connecting the extremes. Egypt, once again, assumed the role of guardian of fragile bridges, trying to keep alive the flame of a seemingly impossible agreement. It was a chess game in which each piece moved with subtlety could change the course of history. Sources close to the situation revealed that nighttime meetings stretched into the early hours, with translators, advisors, and spies observing every detail. Russia, ever watchful, offered technical and military support disguised as diplomacy. Saudi Arabia, though publicly silent, acted with calculated interest. It knew that a pacified Iran would shift the entire balance of regional power. Behind the scenes, Trump received daily briefings and made direct calls to leaders who, until recently, had avoided him. The game was risky, but the payoff promised to be historic. The curious thing is that, while leaders exchanged protocols and promises, the mood on the streets was different. In Tehran, murmurs of hope mingled with distrust. In Washington, critics called it all political theater. And in Jerusalem, the silence was loudest of all. It was there, amid diplomatic smiles and suspicious glances, that the true stage for reconciliation was being created. But, as in every great performance, no one knew for sure who was directing the script, or who, in the end, would receive the applause. Behind the cameras and symbolic gestures, there was a cold calculation, and for Trump, peace was a power equation. He understood early on that, in the 21st century, empires are built not only with tanks, but with treaties. The ceasefire in Gaza and the rapprochement with Iran served a greater purpose: to reshape American influence without firing a single shot. The new war was for narratives, contracts, and markets. Trump realized that true dominance is not achieved through fear, but through economic dependence. And at this, he was a master. The strategy was clear: reposition the United States as an indispensable mediator, the one without which no agreement in the East could happen. A role Washington had lost but was now trying to reclaim. The gesture toward Iran wasn't naivete, it was political branding on a global scale. To portray himself as the man who ended wars and opened markets, a deal artist as he called himself. While his critics saw contradiction, he saw opportunity, and every peace signing was worth headlines, influence, and votes. For the public, the rhetoric was one of harmony. For strategists, it was a masterstroke. The rapprochement with Iran diffused tensions, reduced military costs, and expanded control over energy routes. It was Sun Tzu's old maxim reenacted: the supreme art of war is to win without fighting. And perhaps, on the global stage, Trump was applying exactly that, replacing gunpowder with diplomacy and transforming enemies into investments. A move that, if successful, would forever alter the balance of global power. The news of the ceasefire and the rapprochement with Iran reverberated like thunder on stock exchanges and in offices around the world. Oil reacted first, prices fluctuated, and investors rushed to understand whether this was the beginning of a new era of stability or just a pause before the next crisis. The major European powers, in turn, viewed the announcement with a mixture of relief and fear. After all, a peace brokered by Trump meant an American repositioning that could weaken their own diplomatic roles. The feeling was that the board had been reshuffled again. In Israel, the mood was cautious. The government viewed the rapprochement between Washington and Tehran with suspicion, fearing that the new cycle of alliances would open the door to dangerous concessions. However, popular pressure for stability was growing. The streets, tired of the sound of sirens and constant fear, called for a truce. In Iran, however, the mood was ambiguous: hope for economic openness mixed with distrust of American intentions. And this silent tension fueled the discourse of the more conservative, who saw peace as a cover for domination. In Asian markets, the move was interpreted as a sign that American influence was once again consolidating. China watched from afar, adjusting its energy and trade strategies, while Russia maintained its traditional double game: public criticism, discreet cooperation. The entire planet seemed suspended between skepticism and curiosity. And at the center of this maelstrom, Trump once again became the epicenter of global attention, no longer as the arsonist of yesteryear, but as the man who now promised to put out the fires. In the days following the announcement, Trump's speech began to take on the tones of a promise. A new Middle East, rebuilt, prosperous, and united. The words echoed with the same enthusiasm as a businessman presenting a grand project. He spoke of billion-dollar investments, trade corridors connecting the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, and a future where peace would be the new oil. To many, it sounded utopian. To others, it was the kind of vision only someone outside the mainstream of politics would dare propose. It was as if the tycoon had decided to apply his business method to global diplomacy. American and European companies began to move discreetly. Consultants, engineers, and bankers began exploring opportunities in regions once marked by craters and ruins. The idea was simple and bold: transform former war zones into hubs for reconstruction and commerce. Iran, for its part, saw this as a chance to rebuild its economy and reposition itself as a legitimate regional power. It was a return to the game, but now with new rules, and Trump seemed to dictate them with a smile that blended confidence and defiance. Behind the scenes, it was rumored that this project could redefine the geopolitics of the century. A Middle East rebuilt under American influence would be more than a symbol. It would be the greatest soft power coup ever delivered since the post-war era. And while experts debated probabilities and risks, the world watched anxiously as the next act unfolded. After all, when Trump promised a new beginning, no one knew whether a golden age was about to dawn, or merely the prelude to something even greater. In the corridors of power, it was already being said that Trump's gesture toward Iran was more than diplomacy. It was the beginning of a doctrine. Analysts began calling it the policy of reverse shock. Instead of imposing fear and sanctions, it offered prosperity and integration. It was a reversal of the traditional paradigm, where power came from weapons. Now dominance would come from economic influence, political dependence, and sponsored reconstruction. It was the kind of strategy that confounded adversaries and seduced allies, and left the entire world trying to decipher what would come next. Trump, for his part, seemed comfortable at the center of this new chessboard. He spoke of peace with the same enthusiasm with which, years before, he had spoken of walls. His every speech carried the rhetoric of a salesman of the future. We don't want to control the Middle East. We want to free it from wars and make it prosper. And, curiously, the crowds listened, some with hope, others with caution. Because, deep down, everyone knew, where there is a promise of peace, there is also a new form of power emerging. Meanwhile, behind even quieter scenes, regional leaders pondered the price of this friendship. Would this peace be sustainable or merely an interlude before the next tension? Intelligence reports spoke of discrete movements, of alliances being reshaped, of old enemies returning to speak to each other. The world faced a fascinating paradox. War seemed to have given way to diplomacy, but the game, that had never stopped. And amid smiles, promises, and bilateral agreements, the question echoed in the world's capitals. Would what began as a ceasefire in Gaza become the hallmark of a new world order? In the end, what we saw wasn't just an announcement of peace. It was the beginning of a new kind of war. A silent war, fought with words, agreements, and diplomatic smiles. And as the world's eyes turn to Trump, Iran, and the Middle East, a burning question arises. Are we truly witnessing the end of conflicts, or just the beginning of something much larger, more subtle, and more dangerous? The wars of the future don't begin with bombs. They begin with decisions, promises, and unlikely alliances. Therefore, more than ever, it is essential to learn how to recognize the signs before chaos sets in. There are always small movements, a politically off-key phrase, a shift in sanctions, a fiery speech disguised as diplomacy. Understanding these clues is like seeing a storm before the first drop falls. And those who understand these patterns are not caught off guard. They prepare, analyze, and protect themselves. If you want to know how to identify when a war is about to start, don't miss the ebook, 10 Signs That a War is About to Start. There, you'll discover what analysts don't say in the headlines and learn to read the world with a more discerning eye. Download it now, before the next chapter of history is already being written. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue following the analyses that the world prefers not to discuss openly.